So, first of all, thank you for having me. My name is Harri Hursti, originally from Finland, nowadays living on a refugee camp called Greenwich, Connecticut. And it's a refugee camp because we're all tax refugees over there. So, first of all, I have 127 slides. I'm not going to read the slides. So, I'm going to go through slides with a very fast pace and skipping skipping a lot of the content, so that's explaining the most important things. So, first of all, who I am and why I'm talking about this. I got in the election mess completely accidentally. Ian Sancho, who was election supervisor of Tallahassee, Florida, capital of Florida, he convinced me that when year 2000, Bush versus Gore recount was stopped by Supreme Court, he didn't get the answers. He didn't know what was true and what not. So he convinced me to start looking into his voting machines. And he gave me a gentleman's code of honor that whatever I found, he will be not good in gag order or injunction. I can talk about it, and he was good for his word. And so that's how all of this started. I was not interested about this topic at all. I wasn't believing the stories told to me. And then I found out the horrible truth that these machines are not even good high school projects. They are designed at a time where cyber warfare was science fiction. There was no security considerations whatsoever in most of the time. And, you know, some of these machines actually use encryption like CRC13 or CRC16. And ROT13 is probably very strong in that phase too. So these really don't have any security in place. At the same time, when we did an Everest study back in 2007, we found 381 pages of vulnerabilities, and most of them are still in use unpatched. So all of the vulnerabilities are not, but vast variety of those are there. We have been trying to get not only a voting village, but me personally, this message out, understanding what is true and what is not. Yes, the machines are vulnerable, but then explaining how they are vulnerable and fighting the misinformation, disinformation, which is around, and making everything real. These are two movies I helped to make. Hacking Democracy was HBO documentary, and the later one, Kill Chain, HBO documentary too. Both of them were Emmy nominated for investigative journalism. Yes, we didn't win, but at least we tried. Anyway, so this is not an announcement of any new hack. This is all about telling what the story of what the U.S. elections are, because every single country has their different flavor of elections. It's not the same everywhere. So question becomes, how U.S. is doing their elections, how some other countries are doing their elections, what are the unique vulnerabilities, and especially why you cannot ever go and say, well, that country is doing it well, let's copy that. No, that doesn't work because we have a very different idea of what democracy is. So, how it all started. This is the iconic picture of 2000, pregnant chat, hanging chat, all kinds of chat. So basically when they were looking for the punch cards and trying to figure out what the problem is. America did what America does, so they were embarrassed and they decided that this is a good time to throw about $3 billion of money into the problem. And there was no security standards. Actually, the only standards which were existing were abolished because the Bush administration, when they were handing out the money, decided that elections need innovation. And all the regulation and pesky security standards are just stopping and hampering down innovation. So abolishing all security standards and handing out the money without security standards was a political choice by Bush administration. Bush was Republican president at the time when HAVA happened. So none of this is accidental. So what is election looking like? This is the year 2000 ballot in the first primary election. So as you see, the number of candidates, even in a small state like New Hampshire, is a little bit more than just two candidates. In primaries, you have two kinds of primaries. You have a censuses and you have primaries. Primaries are conducted by law. Censuses are private meetings and town meeting type of choosing your electoral college members. They are not governed by law. Now, what the actual election ballot, this is a very simple ballot for election day. It's only two sides and not that many races. This is simple. When we start looking a more common one, this is still a simple side. And when we look at what it can be, there are many places where you have 3 or 4 sides of ballot in a general election. General election, the ballot is simpler than in midterms and in special elections. The largest ballot I have seen is 12 sides, so 6 pages both sides to vote. That was in San Diego, California. So these elections cannot be conducted by human count because human error rate in those tiny little how tight how small the margin of error is, a margin of victory, it cannot be done human. So we have to do it in computer. At the same time, we cannot trust the computers being used. And absolutely the only way to do it right now is with paper ballot because we don't have a technology available for us to conduct elections with electronic voting. So in Ohio, when we started with the Everest, and ever since, every single voting machine we have ever had in independent study anywhere from the world, we have been able to hack in less than 2 weeks. Most of the machines are hacked in less than 48 hours. That's how good these are. And when I say less than 2 weeks, that's because sometimes we get 5 or 6 systems at the same time, so we start to go one by one. But this is really telling how these systems are horrible. And actually this system here, which is a high-speed scanner used usually to process tens of thousands of ballots, it's still using zip drive. That's really the storage media. It's UNX based, and if you put in a zip drive with the update.sh, it runs at the root without telling user it's doing it. So anyway, what could possibly go wrong? So we are right now using a general purpose computers and general purpose operating systems in most of the time in elections. In every time when it's a central tabulator, yes, but it's very common that there's no secure boot. There is no signed code, absolutely not. And if there's any kind of encryption, that is purely for marketing purposes. So it really doesn't tell you anything about it. And this is even more worse because new technology coming in electronic poll books and all of that area is bringing in more general purpose, repurposed tablets, repurposed systems, which have been not even hardened. If you look, the election system pictures have been published from Georgia, the Dominion system. You see that the Russian-made computer games, which comes with the standard Dell, are still installed. They didn't even remove that. So no hardening, no nothing. Again, what is the trusted supply chain? That doesn't exist. So there's no confirmation in reality in most of the places, nowhere in the real sense, but even in a theater way, that the code you're running is actually the code which has been certified to be running. And that's obviously a big part of the problem. There's no verification. If you look to some of the systems which have hash, they claim itself hashes itself, but actually it just prints out constant string, which is your hash to be verified. So absolutely no security whatsoever in that sense. And we really have only now with the Executive Order 14028, which came in May 21, started in the federal government looking into the software supply chain security. Hardware supply chain even worse at the time, but software supply chain is right now coming as a focus area. Elections are always 30 years behind of rest of the industry. So still in an election area, the vendors are trigger happy and use the legal offenses to try to keep the research not happening. So what is the standard level? When I said the standards doesn't exist, there's no enforceable standards. The certification is done against volunteer voting system guidelines. Volunteer voting system guidelines, which means that the vendor can choose what part of the volunteer standards they use. First of all, we have a volunteer guidelines 1.0, 1.1, 2.0 and 3.0 is right now the newest one. Every single system you use has been certified against 1.0 because there's no reason the vendors don't want to look to newer guidelines. At the same time, it's an ITA model, independent test authority, which means that the vendor is paying the test authority and the vendor is negotiating with the test authority how the testing is done. And in certain cases, which is part of the kill chain document, California, the certifier started using NIST standard, Federal Information Processing Standard, and they got immediately fired. They said, no, we don't want to do that kind of testing. No. We want to have our kind of testing. So when I say there's no standard, literally it means there's no standards. The only standards which are really tested is, does it electrocute the voter? Does it electrocute the accidentally the poll worker? How high you can drop it, and how it works in the warm moisture of Florida. And mentioning about warm moisture of Florida, when you saw the hanging chads, what happened there is that the people were given a stylus to manually punch the paper card. But when you had a very popular candidate, all the chads pushed out of the punch card stacked underneath the ballot. And now you think about that more popular the voter is, the more popular candidate is, more paper is stacked underneath. And then the senior citizens, 80-year-old, with Harri trying to push it. I'm a big guy. I couldn't push it after 300 votes have been cast for a certain candidate. And the whole 2000 mess could have been avoided by simple instruction. Shake the table once an hour so that it will have spread the chats. That was the only thing needed, and we would have never had this mess. Well, this is showing how all the elections, how narrow the margins are. So that's why the human error in count, even when it's not under stress situation of election night, the error count is easily 2-3% in the first count. And 19 elections out of 50 are decided with a less than 1% margin, which means a human count has an error margin way too high for this. So what is US elections looking like? Well, the 210 million registered voters, and you have almost 180,000 precincts. Well, the idea here is that you build ad hoc networks in every single place when you have a precinct which have multiple e-poll books and whatnot. So they are all ad hoc networks. And the vendors have been lobbying very wisely that these systems are not connected to internet. Which means they were lobbying. The mantra is, if you have 2 firewalls, you are not connected to internet. It's okay to say you are not connected to internet if you have 2 firewalls. It doesn't tell that the firewalls have to be configured or in a packet forwarding chain or powered on. It's a checklist. You have 2 firewalls. You are not connected to internet. We will get back to that. So the technology also comes with a lot of different variations. It's not only we are over-focusing right now into the vote tabulation, vote counting systems. We are not looking all of the systems there. And any one of these systems, in a myriad of interconnected systems, if you hack that, you can affect the outcome. If you are changing the districting, if you are enabled to disfranchise the voters that way, e-poll books, voter registration databases, the election night reporting. There's a myriad of systems there. And all of these systems are interconnected. And some of these systems have to be internet facing, like voter registration systems. And still you have data flows from one system to another. So every single system in the election environment is connected to internet, either directly or indirectly. Every other statement is just hogwash. And election systems are national security systems because governments can be changed by bullets or ballots. That's the hard fact. An election is a unique problem for the reason being that unlike any other system, you have to get it right. This is more than Six Sigma system, but there is no correcting errors afterwards. So you have to get it right. The other problem is that you have to have auditable results, and at the same time, you have to have secret ballot. Secret ballot means that even if the voter is cooperating, even if the voter wants to reveal how I voted, I shouldn't be able to convince you that how I voted. Because if I'm able to prove how I voted, then vote buying, vote selling, and coercion comes into play. And all of these are felonies, and serious felonies. When we are living in liberal cities, we don't see the whole landscape. And voter coercion is a big part of problem in elections, whether you look Estonia, in Europe, or US, in every country. So that is a major problem we tend to forget, and we tend to forget the problem because in our environment, we don't see it. In Estonia, they try to claim that electronic voting is possible because you can vote as many times as you want, but the last vote counts. What it means is that on a Friday when internet voting stops, there are voting parties. Everybody comes in the restaurant, all the mobile phones goes into a bowl, and after that they vote in a single laptop and your friend is checking that you voted right. Only after internet voting is over, then everybody gets their phone back. Now, of course, you can still vote again on an election day, except that they have church services on Sundays. And that day the church services start very early and last very long. It's an amazing thing what you learn when you are doing investigation and you talk with the taxi drivers, because they explain exactly how everything works. And actually, that's how I went to these election parties where people are voting and your friend is checking your vote. Another part which a peculiarity in the US, and a lot of people don't understand even in the US this, in the US, a lot of the new technologies try to be pushed through by saying, well, military voters overseas, they need help to vote, so that's why they have to be allowed to do internet voting. There's two things. First of all, in the US, there are laws saying everybody have to have the same method of voting. So if you allow internet voting for one group of people, then you have to allow it to everyone else. The second part is the only people in the whole United States who don't have a legal right to guaranteed secret ballots is military. So military voters actually have a less security than any other voter group in the US. So when we look for testing, the problem is parallel testing doesn't work. We already know parallel testing doesn't work from the Volkswagen scandal when the car knew I'm being tested. But there are a number of other reasons why the testing methods which have been proposed are absolutely non-functional. So only repeated testing and penetration testing works. And this is a new thing in election area where they are starting to look into the possibility of implementing penetration testing, but they are far from that. The term red teaming is all the time used in the US. And then red teaming, well, we did the red teaming, it's costed $30,000. Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of hogwash and a lot of misunderstanding what different things work. And all is fair in love and war and stealing your votes and digital assets. So the whole threat model, how US is looking election, has been wrong and gradually wrong. So traditionally the thinking in the US was the only threat is internal threat by a supporter of dishonest candidate who wants to win. US elections until very recently hadn't considered a foreign influence, hadn't considered a nation state attacker, and haven't considered a threat actor who actually doesn't care who wins and loses. Maybe they have a preference, but who wins and loses, because the main aspect and the main goal is just to sow chaos and discord. So these models have been completely misunderstood. So in the US, the identification who is your potential adversary is missing and has been misguided. There's no security standards which can be enforced. There is no methodology in place of any kind of systematic testing and certification. And still you're trying to be using the system. And that's why instead of trust but verify, this has to be never trust and always verify. In our head, election system is very simple. You take one vote, you add it, and off you go. This is an oversimplified reference model of oversimplified voting system used in the US. This is what the reality is. This doesn't even have the voter registration, the e-poll books. It doesn't have the voter election night reporting. This is the ideal oversimplified model. This is what the real models use. Like this is an actual one of the two largest voting system vendors, how the system works. And the funny thing is you see it here, chip disks, you see PCMI cards, which is literally is PCMI, static RAM cards, you have compact flash cards, you have all kind of things which are from the past. And actually, the fact that it has MySQL means that it's a very new system, because the COBOL is still a predominant language in some of the systems. And in a lot of these systems, the whole encryption is really or either non-existing or it is a purely decorative. For example, one system vendor who is claiming that our system, everything is encrypted. Well, everything is not encrypted, but those files who are encrypted have the naked encryption key for symmetric key in the file itself in the beginning. So, of course, key management is a hard problem. That's why you always have your key handy. But the bigger problem is a lot of the systems who claim that they are using encryption, they are not using even a proper hashing. They are just using CRC and claiming that's encryption. They are claiming that that is the way you can protect the votes. So, very poor systems, and I have to say that if somebody would be trying to explain me what I have seen with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it. This is so unbelievably bad from time to time. Again, air capit design, so to speak. I had a wonderful thing. I was sent by Secretary of State to inspect one system, and that was one of the states where you have a two of everything, Republican key and Democratic key in every door. There's two people for everything. And I came there, and they said, I don't understand why Secretary of State sent you. We are completely unhackable. All our systems are air-gapped. We only use Wi-Fi. And I started laughing because I thought it was a brilliant delivery of joke. And when I started laughing, they were looking at me if I have two heads and 3 hands. And I realized, oh, that's what you think air-gapping is. So interestingly enough, I started asking, well, who told you air-gapping is Wi-Fi? And so the vendor told us. Great. So this is a reality in that environment. The same thing about vendors. When we were filming the movie, we were in a live election situation, and one of the voting machines, which were in front of, I saw the security seals were broken. So I took the election officials next to them, and we were filming, and I was waiting for them to see that the security seals are broken. Nothing happens. Then I point like, hey, the seals are broken. Oh, don't worry about it. We stopped sealing those 10 years ago because they were breaking all the time, and and the vendor says completely safe, so we stopped sealing these machines. Live USB ports, live Ethernet ports, everything underneath those bays, which was supposed to be sealing. And I asked them, well, can you show me that the vendor has been actually telling you that? And they did. They showed that the vendor have said, no, you don't need to seal this. This is unnecessary to be sealed. It's completely safe this way. It's just unnecessary hassle. So again, when we talk about penetration testing and how penetration testing is important, the way the vendors have been explaining this is to say, well, if you do something like Voting Village and you are hacking something, you cannot do it in election setting because of physical security. And at the same time, they are telling, and they put unmeasurable burden to the physical security. And at the same time, they tell, well, we don't need to do the physical security because everything is so secure. In the US, its common practice is sleepover. The voting machines are given to the poll workers up to 2 weeks before the election day to bring home. They are in their garages, and they bring it to the polling place in the morning. Even worse, they are shipped to the churches and schools week before the election. They're just in the hallway. Students, everybody can access those. And it is quite funny how the physical security can be bad. Now, it's not only the voting machines. The law says that the ballots have to be preserved under lock and key. And this is the one swing state's election official's idea what lock and key means. This whole place was in a garage. Behind me were 4th of July decorations. On my left side was the garage, the gardener's equipment. So it was a humongous place where they can open the doors and people were coming in and out. These are actually the ballots of 2020 election. And the primary election were in another dumpster thing on the side. So again, while the law is very clear, saying under lock and key, how the election officials interpret that is something else. In this place, this is a very much a Trump land place. 80% of the votes went to Trump. But the problem is that then they can say, well, we can certify our own result. This actually happened in Coffee County, Georgia. They claim we cannot certify our own results, so we try to throw all the votes out because we are ourselves failing. So first they say, we don't need to be careful because we know how this county is going to go anyway. And then after that say, oh, now we don't know. Maybe it was 81%, maybe it should have been 82%. So the physical security is paramount importance. It's neglected in large part of the US, especially the rural area, and it is fueling the possible claims of hacking. Again, the vendors are very much the source of bad practices. This is a Ivotronic. It's very much still in use system, a little bit outdated. And when you go to web, you can find all the passwords, which, by the way, cannot be changed. They are hardwired passwords. But again, overwrite password, ESS. ESS is the name of the company. So that's how you overwrite. But it gets worse. This is another vendor, and they are explaining carefully that the regulation requires you to rotate your password. So alternate between those two passwords, and here add one number and write it down so that we know. The sad part of this is that the manual reveals that the vendor knows why the password has to be changed. And the vendor themselves are instructing the counties to circumvent the intention of the regulation. Would you buy a national security system from this tacky website? The answer is, of course, that's why it is existing. So let's zoom in. Our election coding services saves your time and effort. So the most critical part of the whole election, programming the voting machine elections, you can outsource from this tacky website. And this actual website is from a company which is serving for 5 states and significant amount of swing voters. All right, well, that's a good start. So let's see what else we can find from this wonderful website. Oh, they sell physical security stuff too. Great, what do we have here? Oh, we have the State of Michigan paper seal, the seal which is protecting the votes. Well, the stack of that is $4.50. I'm absolutely certain if out of state from New York, I would send my personal credit card there, they will definitely not ship it to, yes, they do. So you don't need to counterfeit the seals, you can just go and buy them. Again, the same place. Well, what we have here, we have the central administrator card, we have supervisor card, about $10. What could possibly go wrong? It's absolutely necessary that you can buy them from web store. And actually, we created a card ourselves, which is as a demonstration, a card which gives you unlimited number of votes, so it resets itself automatically. Again, as said, they ship it. We did a try. There was about 30 companies in this space. Most of the companies didn't ask any questions when we were called. One company says, can you send us a letterhead? And that was the proof that we are, doing the right thing. This whole thing has been flagged, and I have been making sure this is known, trying to get any kind of regulation in place. Nothing has happened in 10 years. The biggest problem in this area is that these companies have no regulation. They are in strip malls, in the shopping centers, no physical security whatsoever. Their website is listing all their employees. They have their personal stories about their cats, all the words you need. It's a social engineering heaven if you want to use it. And even the ownership, who is owning these companies, they don't need to close. So some notable election-related campaigns and hacking campaigns happens all the time. Estonia, Georgia, Belgium, Ukraine, of course, was very well documented. This happened twice. France, US. These hacks happen all the time, and these are the hacks we know about. These are the hacks we have got out in the wild and have been able to either neutralize the hack or at least mitigate and correct. In the case, for example, in Ukraine 2014, the forerunner results were published, but after publication, they were able to redact that and because the real results were known. Election right resulting is a bigger and bigger problem. CISA, so in Department of Homeland Security, their cybersecurity infrastructure, Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency has been publishing instructions for the counties how to counteract and how to mitigate the election night reporting problems. Again, election night, the biggest part of election night reporting is in the heads of the election officials. It's meaningless. They think this is intermediate results. They are not official results. We don't care about security of that. Of course, the media and the general public don't understand that. So when you have a situation like wrong results in Ghana, the consequences are riots and loss of life. Full stop. They don't understand on the streets, and they are not informed that these are so they're so overlooked area of security in election. Because they are not legally binding, nobody really cares about it. But this is from the public perspective, a massive problem. And it's a low-hanging fruit because these systems have very little security or security at all. And they are not considered important, even when they are the only way where the general public can learn the results with confidence. And if you all of a sudden have different results in the evening and the morning, like what happened in 2019 in Jakarta, you have burning city. That's the hard reality. Again, when you look at the different ways of attacks, this is really an area where you can use all the same techniques as any spam agency, spam email campaign is using, an easy low-hanging fruit to attack. And these attacks happen all the time. And also false claims of attack happen all the time, because if you look PGP attacks, and if you look how the anti-spoofing and anti-DDoS attack prevention works, it's very hard to detect or convince yourself, is this a PGP attack or is the system working as intended to be protecting DOS attacks? And this caused a massive amount of misinformation, disinformation in the last election, with the claims that US votes were sent to Germany and counted in secret in Germany. That actually part of that whole problem was was result of how Cloudflare works. So if you were in the US looking where the vote server is, it says it's Germany. If you look in Germany, it says outside of London. If you look in London, it says Falls Church outside of Washington, D.C. Round robin. But this was never communicated effectively before election. And after election, when the conspiracy theories started to go wild, we were in a situation where that couldn't have been any more taken back. Some of the elections, how the election hacking happens, I don't know if you knew about this, where the election in Ukraine 2014, the funny part of this was that the Russian television was broadcasting the same fraudulent results which were found in the server before the official results were released. So at least it became clear, and there was no possible deniability who were the attackers, because how they could have known the fraudulent results hacked into. Again, once the real results were discovered and put in, the significant change happened. But a good example of a very successful attack, because even when in Ukraine, they understood that this was election result hack, the same fraudulent results were published in Russia, and they were never making the same correction, it was hack. Instead of the information on that side was to say, oh, this shows that the pro-Russian candidate election was stolen from the pro-Russian candidate. Ghana, the same thing. It's very sad that when the government's only possible way to try to communicate that the results are fraudulent is to use Twitter. And now when Twitter is as bad as it is, really there's no unified way of communicating, the officials to communicate back to the general public if something goes wrong. And this is a problem. BIA sees when we did a hacking contest in DEF CON, and that's our sister village. She was 11 years old, and it took 9 minutes when she hacked the election night reporting system mock-up we had. And again, there was an immediate claim that, oh, we had pre-hacked the system because not really anyone would have a real system with such a trivial vulnerability. And then when you go to Mueller report, it reveals that GRU was using that same attack out in the wild, the same attack which Bianca Lewis had been demonstrating earlier in the voting village and in Iceland. So again, the systems, because the election night reporting systems are not considered security sensitive, such a trivial thing that checking that you don't have a SQL inject capability, that's not done. Another good example, South County, Wisconsin, these results were out for a long time. And if you see the result, you see something very weird. So this error was not corrected for almost a month. So you see that the results, you have more votes reported than the ballots cast. Obviously impossible result. And you would think that in order to have the general public confidence, you would absolutely want to correct this as quickly as possible. It was not done. The same was in 3 top races. So it was not only president, it was also the Congress seat and Senate. And the actual explanation was, oh, modeming in didn't work, so that's why we entered the results manually once. We didn't think it worked, and putting it twice. Again, what means modeming in results? That means FTP. That's FTP over internet. But we have to remember, if there's 2 firewalls, it's not internet. I'm sorry, that's why I try to make a humor, because this is so sad that unless you can make a humor out of it, it's not going to work. So a lot of homebrew systems, a lot of legacy systems, just no possible way of securing. And again, USB sticks. This is a real explanation how in one place the system works. You have an old PC which hasn't been patched, end-of-life Windows, and you're carrying USB sticks between the systems from internet system to the air-gapped system. And this all because they didn't have the program they used for scraping the PDF file working in the newer Windows version. So that's why they used this horrible thing. We were talking about the HDM problems in yesterday, but this is another example. The vendors recommends to have an HDMI pulled out of the secure server to a public area where everybody can go. And of course, HDMI can carry internet. And these examples just go on and on and on. So we are in a system where we have the reporting problem, we have the voter registration problem. All of these systems are vulnerable, and there's no possible way of getting this corrected unless there's a regulation. And at this point of time, there's no regulation. In the United States, elections are run by the states, not by the federal government. And every state can have their own laws and done everything on their own way. So this is just a multiple slides explaining how broken is the way how the results are transmitted. Again, when you look at the US map, this looks pretty much Republican wins. And this is a mindset what a lot of people have when they look at these maps. If you look the jurisdictions, this is the jurisdiction where the ballot size is telling what is the population. It looks very different. So when you look the number of counties, which is 3,000, a round number, 3,000 counties, a round number, Biden won 500 and won the whole election. It is because the counties which are the large cities, those are where the population lives, and land doesn't vote. So you have a great disparity. You have the cities where you have a better security, and you have the rural area where they don't care about security that much. And this is the part of the problem why trying to secure the system is so hard, because the people who are in the smaller places don't want to have the burden the security will bring. Every state have their different laws, very interesting laws from time to time. And also there are 2 kinds of states, bottom up and up down. In the top down state, the Secretary of State, who is officially the elections chief, has a control over the election. In bottom up is the local counties are making all the decisions, including the purchasing decisions. And there are states where the county laws are superseding the state laws. Again, the unmitigated disinformation, which I mentioned before, this was the great lie that the U.S. votes are counted overseas in Germany. There was even a claim that there was a gunfight when a loyal patriots went to Germany and had a shootout to get the servers back. And the lie actually continues by claiming that the bomb in Nashville, Tennessee, which went over at Christmas, was intended to destroy the servers, which have been now in secure location in AT&T building. So this all started just because nobody communicated how the system works and how the election results are protected and how the reporting system is protected. The other part is granularity. The conspiracy theorists always mention these two pictures. You have first the results where it's 1,690,000, and then all of a sudden 20,000 votes disappear. Claim this is the evidence of a massive fraud. The problem here is that you don't understand how the elections work. So first of all, in the US, it's common that batches, the law says that the ballots have to be put in arbitrary batches of 100 votes. And the votes have to stay together. So when there is a write-in, there is any kind of action which needs a human, all the votes are held back until one of the ballots is manually inspected. And as a result, for example, in Georgia, 5,800 ballots were holding over 20,000 votes back. And as a result, when the human processing happens, this is the conspiracy theorist's favorite picture, all of a sudden the votes jump. Well, that's because the votes are coming from same area, which is same demographic, and as a result, all of a sudden, everything jumps. But that's not, this has happened every election before. This is the only time when this is, have been put in the frame. And also, these are the two pictures which conspiracy theorists use. The other states where the thing happened for Trump being winning, they don't share these pictures. So this jumping and so-called dumps, that happens on both directions. And if you look this whole system in system point of view, this is showing that when you look the votes from the system, there is no jump. It's only in a reporting. So this is telling how the underlooked property of reporting is the great source of this information. I'm going to be skipping a little bit of slides because I want to just go to, I'm talking here about the Wi-Fi, how the actual hacks can be carried out. And I'm just going to go straight to the place where these are literally telling how the actual hacks and what kind of tools and how simple and cheap are the system. By the way, using barcodes, what a wonderful idea. I don't know here in the UK, but in the US, people love to have fake driving license to buy beer. And the same fake driving license is used to register yourself to the vote. And it's a USB device, which can be reprogrammed through untrusted channel called barcode. What could possibly go wrong? Absolutely nothing. I just want to jump to the last part, which is what happens in Estonia. So Estonia claims they can do internet voting. And they are publishing the source code and they are publishing the videos, how they prove their people that the election is fair. So, first of all, this is the actual code used when they claim that there have never been corrupted ballot. This is the actual code they used in 7 elections, I think. And when we revealed this, they obviously fixed it. They removed the comments. So still today, they are running the whole system with no integrity check at all. Also, they're claiming that when the client software is signed, they publish the videos. And if you look at that video, well, let's take a look. This is the signing of the code in a computer which has never been connected to internet. So that's why it have a torrent, and it have pirated movies, and it has a poker stars. It's clear evidence that this connect is never connected to internet. Anyway, just the last word is blockchain. Very bad idea. It always comes back. Blockchain, every blockchain voting system which has been presented has been hacked, and it's unmitigated disaster. So blockchain, don't even think about it. It's a one way of getting yourself in a deep trouble. Anyway, that's our Estonian hack. There's a website where we explain how to do it. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Harri. If we have any questions quickly, I'm going to ask a leading question to start off with. What do you think about the UK's paper-based system versus some of the electronic systems that are available? And just so you guys know, the London elections were wanting to be these machines that we're talking about here. So what do you think?
We have a long history of fraud on paper, 4,000 years. We can mitigate paper because you cannot do wholesale. If you go a polling location with a paper ballot, there's boxes and boxes, tens of thousands of kilos of those ballots, and you cannot perform a wholesale attack. But most importantly, the voter has recorded their voter's intent on a permanent media paper, which means if you have a questions, you can always recount. And there is methodological risk limiting audit developed by Professor Phil Stark from UC Berkeley, which is a statistical methodology with a very low workload to go back to the paper, take a random sample, and prove yourself whether the result is right or wrong. So we have a methodology to use the paper to convince public and yourself that the election, not that the election has the last moment vote the right result, but the outcome hasn't been changed. So the right candidate won.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there decent quality voting systems available if legislation has changed to make that a requirement?
So, unfortunately, there is no good voting system yet in the market. There are now initiatives, first time ever, to develop open source systems where you are building in the idea that the system cannot be trusted. So it's facilitating easier human process to verify. This is really never trust, always verify system. Those systems are now in infancy. I have great hope that in next 10 years we have such paper ballot systems coming in the market. But today there's not a single system I could recommend and say this is a system which is significantly better than the other systems. And by the way, I have been building 2 companies myself. Both time I left because the company decided that they want to do this more commercial oriented than security oriented. And that's why I didn't want to have my name attached to that.
And last question.
Brilliant. Thank you. Fantastic talk, and very much with you on the paper ballots idea as well. One thing that I think is quite fascinating about this is obviously the kind of the proponent of the voting system's a dodgy argument at the moment is very much sort of the Trump side, and for reasons that I won't even go into. Obviously, he's not a particularly flavour of the month at the moment. It's certainly in our media kind of thing. Do you think that these companies are taking advantage of being able to go, the whole thing is a conspiracy theory, rather than there's some spurious claims, but the system has general security faults? Do you think that this is kind of, because nothing really seems to be being improved whilst it's just wrapped up as a conspiracy?
So when I started with a couple of friends Voting Village, we were called out by politicians saying we are irresponsible people because we let foreign adversaries to access voting systems. And I said, absolutely, I agree with you guys, because the foreign people are American citizens. None of the voting major vendor systems are made in US. Dominion's main code base comes from Serbia. The predecessor's main code base comes from Canada. There's no US-based system. And while some of the systems have features which are very hard to find what is the legal use for those, and they have a very much sloppiness, I don't see a deliberate I don't see a smoking gun, if you may. As I said, most of the systems are just so old design that they were designed when cybersecurity was science fiction. Cyber warfare was science fiction. So they're just very bad systems by design.
Great. Let's have another round of applause for Harri. Great.